Hello there. Thank you so much for joining us. This is News Channel Nebraska. My name's Eric McKay. Let's take a look at our top headlines today. Questions mounting after a 14-year-old allegedly opened fire at a Georgia high school Wednesday. 4 people are dead, 2 students and 2 teachers. 9 others were hospitalized. Lee Waldman has more on what we know about the suspect.
I'm just still in shock, and I just prayed that he would be okay.
I love you. Part of a flurry of text Erin Clark got from her son at Appalachia High School as a shooter opened fire, killing 4 people and wounding 9 others. Clark's son surviving the violence, reuniting with his mom outside the school.
He's not a hugger, and I had to force him to hug me.
Tragically, 14-year-olds Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angelo, as well as teachers Richard Aspinwall and Christina Ermey, were killed during the shooting. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation revealed the suspected gunman, a 14-year-old student named Colt Gray, began the shooting just after 10 a.m. He was arrested quickly after being confronted by a school resource officer. Right now, officials say there's no obvious connection between Gray and the victims.
This is everybody's worst nightmare, and I just want to offer my sincere condolences and our thoughts and prayers to the families that have lost loved ones.
Wednesday night, members of the community gathered at a local park to pray for those who were hurt and killed, less than a month after school began at the high school of some 1,900 students.
I lived in Winder all my life. I'm 15. I've been here like a long time. I just never thought. That's why my parents came here. It's such a peaceful town, and just nothing ever happened. I didn't think it would be here where I live.
As the nation responds to another school shooting, Nebraska U.S. Senator Deb Fischer among those weighing in. Fischer shared her thoughts during an exclusive interview with News Channel Nebraska following a tour Wednesday of Norfolk.
Horrible news, devastating. It can happen anywhere. You know, we have disturbed individuals that are out there. They'll react in any kind of instance and react in devastating ways to families. I don't believe any law can be passed that's going to stop any kind of violence. You see, I mean, we always hear about Chicago, the strictest gun laws, and how many shootings a night do we see in Chicago. I believe it has to be in your communities. It has to be in your schools, that you have people who are compassionate, who care, and who are trained. I think it's up to the communities. Government is not the answer to every problem that's out there, and especially in this case.
The lone fatal school shooting on record in Nebraska happened in 2011 when Millard South student Robert Butler Jr. fatally shot assistant principal Vicky Kaspar before shooting himself. Meanwhile, as the conflict in Gaza drags on, Nebraska U.S. Senator Deb Fischer taking a strong stance on the war. Fischer serves on the Senate's Armed Services Committee. She said Wednesday that she believes Israel, quote, has to do what they have to do.
The United States under this administration has been very slow, let's be honest. They have been very slow. They've been criticized by Republicans and Democrats in Congress. They've been slow on helping Israel with the munitions that they need to wipe out a bloodthirsty terrorist group who are America's enemies as well.
Fischer's statements came on the same day that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel must keep open-ended control of Gaza's border with Egypt. That development comes as the U.S. is developing a new proposal for a ceasefire and hostage release, hoping to break a long deadlock and bring an end to the nearly 11-month-old war. Closer to home, Attorney General Mike Hilgers ramping up his campaign against Delta 8, hitting 4 businesses in Norfolk with lawsuits. Luke Stera has more on Hilgers' campaign and where this leaves the smoke shops of northeast Nebraska.
Nebraska Attorney General Mike Hilgers is continuing his stance against Delta 8 in the state of Nebraska, announcing new lawsuits against smoke shops in Norfolk.
We filed 4 lawsuits covering all those particular stores because we want to clean up Norfolk and make it safe for Nebraska children.
This is the latest in Hilgers' campaign to end the sale of misleading Delta 8 products he says are marketed towards kids. Last October, Hilgers filed lawsuits against different companies around the state, alleging products sold were mislabeled.
None of these stores ID, none of these stores have displayed any concern for selling these types of products to young people.
Hilgers says of the 34 products tested in Norfolk, none were accurately labeled, and more than a third tested positive for marijuana. District 1 Representative Mike Flood agrees with Hilgers, saying children end up in the justice system due to Delta 8.
You're handing out essentially a controlled substance to minor children, and it's easily available at one of many stores in a town of 25,000.
Hilgers says the penalties that can come from the lawsuit can be up to a $4,000 fine per product. Of the recent companies who have been hit with lawsuits, the AG says the goal is not to shut down the companies.
By giving them clear path to being able to sell what they're going to sell, to resolve the lawsuit without financial penalty, we're actually giving them the opportunity to continue to operate.
Despite a bill in the legislature failing to restrict the sale of Delta 8 products, Hilgers will continue to crack down on the compound. He plans to approach the state legislature next session to restrict the compound. Reporting for News Channel Nebraska, this is Luke Stara.
Mike Flood is the founder and owner of Flood Communications and News Channel Nebraska. President Biden set to announce a multi-billion-dollar investment toward clean energy projects in rural areas. The $7 billion in financing going towards 16 different projects, including the Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association, which supplies power to 9 different utilities in Nebraska's Panhandle. The president will make his announcement in Wisconsin Thursday. The White House says the funding will help speed up the transition to clean energy in rural communities while also creating jobs in those areas. The administration says it's the largest investment in rural electrification since FDR was president. Well, a rural couple in southeast Nebraska says they want to restore an abandoned pioneer cemetery with grave sites dating back to 1906. Doug Kennedy has more.
On a windswept hill down a narrow country road in far southern Gage County sits a pioneer cemetery that Lynn and Leanne Bogart want to restore. They've gotten preliminary approval from the Gage County Planning Commission, and now the project is before the county supervisors. The area was the scene of previous storm damage.
About 2 years ago, that was hit by a tornado, and you as a county had committed to send some crews down there to do some cleanup of that because they lost several trees, and this has been under your maintenance program. This particular cemetery dates back to 1882. So the Bunell family, Ezra and Emma Bunell, not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct, but we sent out land notifications, quite a range.
State law regulates maintenance of such cemeteries, and the Bogarts are taking the necessary legal steps to reestablish it. The cemetery was abandoned in 1977.
We have a cemetery association formed, and it will be filed with the county clerk as soon as we get approval for the cemetery. We actually have 9 active members on this cemetery association committee, and our initial desire is to just get it cleaned up, get the fence repaired. We won't reopen the cemetery until it is, presentable to the public, and by that time we'll have our perpetual care fund advanced.
The Gage County Board will act on the proposal in 2 weeks. There are several pioneer cemeteries for which the county has agreements with groups to help maintain. In southern Gage County, Doug Kennedy, News Channel, Nebraska.
Verizon is buying Frontier Communications in a $20 billion deal helping to strengthen its fiber network. Verizon Communications said Thursday the transaction will also help it in the areas of artificial intelligence and IoT. Frontier's concentrated heavily on its fiber network capabilities over the last 4 years, investing $4.1 billion upgrading and expanding its fiber network. It gets now more than half of its revenue from fiber products. Frontier has 2 retail locations in Nebraska, in Columbus and in Kearney. Well, for millions of years, rocks from the Black Hills and Rocky Mountains have washed into northwest Nebraska. And over the last 38 years, thousands have gathered to admire the local stones. Michael Shively has more.
Every year on Labor Day weekend, tiny Crawford, Nebraska turns into a rockhound's dream.
It's a red hematite quartz.
The Crawford Rock Show draws people from across the country, like Randy Wade of South Dakota.
It's a new mineral find, just discovered about 12 years ago, I believe.
Wade is one of about 70 vendors at the 4-day event, drawn in by the all-consuming hobby.
It's hard for me to talk to other people about rocks, unless, and so here you're surrounded by people that understand your language.
The rockhounds come to the town of 800 largely because of its location, a stone's throw away from gravel beds containing rare rocks like the Fairburn agate.
They are a sedimentary agate that formed in the Black Hills and were washed out of the Black Hills down into the Nebraska Panhandle, and you can find them north of Crawford here.
Wade Bynes of Shadron has been the show chairman for 27 years. He's seen it more than double in size and sophistication over that time.
Rock people are good people by nature. They go out, look at the land and hunt and find the beauty in creation.
That connection to the earth is what drew Mark Dameron of New York to the hobby.
People ask me all the time, well, what do you do with them? I sit around and look at them and admire them. And sit there and go and think, nature is the master artist.
And you're the first person to ever see that come up.
Doug Scheel of North Platte caught the rock collecting bug 60 years ago.
It's like Christmas every time you cut a rock.
He's been a vendor at the Crawford Show for a couple decades.
You wouldn't believe the beauty that nature provides to us. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And some of these cut rocks, when you look at the rocks that have been cut, you're seeing things that took hundreds of millions of years to create, and you're seeing the inside of that rock as a human being. That's unbelievable.
The thrill of that next neat find keeps the hobby alive and keeps Labor Day weekend in northwest Nebraska on the calendars of hundreds of visitors. In Crawford, Michael Shively, News Channel Nebraska.
And finally in sports, former Nebraska head coach Frank Solich will be honored in Lincoln this weekend. The former Nebraska and Ohio University coach will be enshrined in the College Football Hall of Fame this December. The Hall of Fame in Nebraska will be honoring Solich with an on-campus salute during this Saturday's game against Colorado. Hall of Fame officials will present Solich with a plaque which will stay on permanent display in Lincoln. Solich won 173 games in his 22 years as head coach, 58 at Nebraska, 115 in 16 years in Athens. In his 6 years at Nebraska, Solich beat this weekend's opponent, Colorado, 4 times, lost to them twice. You can stay up to date with the very latest by following us online. Head to newschannelnebraska.com. Click on the News tab there. You can also follow us on X, like us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. You're watching News Channel Nebraska.